Welcome back, everybody. This is Dave Barker, Minnesota State University of Moorhead alumnus. We're going to talk right now about writing. Now, writing to me is so profound. I do a lot of serious writing. I'm actually writing a book right now, published one about 10 years ago, didn't do great, but I tried. Literature is really tough because it's kind of one-dimensional. You know, it's just from your head to the computer or from your pencil to your pad. But television, when it comes to writing, it's so many things. I'll tell you, I've worked with other reporters and sat next to anchors, some of whom are really famous broadcasters right now. They can't write a lick, but they were great at interviewing or at anchoring. So good storytellers, just not great writers, and that's okay. You need to find your niche. But when it comes to writing and television, just remember, it's not just this or punching stuff into your computer. It's a use of natural sound. It's listening. If a bird comes by, talk to your photographer. Did you get that? Because that might be an important bridge to the next thought, to the next, to the next piece of writing. Obviously, the words are really important, but you need all that other stuff. Graphics, short sound bites, declarative things. There's lots of times I'll just put a line down that says "man," and that's how I'll deliver it. Man. All right, first of all, let me just show you a story that got my first Emmy. It took me about 10 years before I got to Los Angeles, before I was even qualified to get an Emmy. Set some goals. My two goals were to get to New York and to get an Emmy. Well, the first time I tried to get an Emmy, I got two. And the first one I did was on a story called A Night in Oakwood. This was about a year after the LA riots. The city had kind of calmed down except for one section. It was called the Oakwood section of Los Angeles. Cops were getting killed. Lots of people were getting killed there. And I remember sitting in a newsroom, 50 people here. The guy that used to produce the Geraldo Rivera show was our kind of our desk person going over all the assignments. And he says, all right, the LA Times did this Oakwood thing. What do you want to do? And so I threw up my hand. By the way, if you suggest something, you're probably going to do it. Remember that in this business. He talks about this Oakwood. I said, why don't we just spend the night there? He says, okay, you, Dave Bush, you're going to spend the night in Oakwood, story tomorrow at 5 o'clock. And I went, oh, man.
Oakwood. The past few months, perhaps the most violent in the over 80-year history of Oakwood.
This is my neighborhood, and nobody's going to tell me where I can live and where I can't live.
The family we stayed with has lived here over a decade. Though you'll hear the words of Jim, Cynthia, and their 12-year-old daughter Cindy, you will not see their faces for obvious security reasons.
Hey, how you doing?
For dinner, pizza. And it had to be delivered early because after 9 at night, delivery companies refused to come into Oakwood.
So you guys have been shot and robbed and you're just not going to do it anymore?
Yeah, it's not safe if you come over here at night.
The helicopter up. You hear it?
Yeah. You hear that a lot?
You hear that a lot. You get immune to it at some point.
You get used to gunshots and helicopters.
Yes.
Jim, meanwhile, keeps his eye on the baseball playoffs, but his ears tuned to a police scanner.
Wilshire Unit, any Wilshire Unit 211 just occurred. Armed with a chrome semi.
There have been 11 fire bombings of homes in the Oakwood area just over the past 15 months. Now, the house we're staying in tonight was bombed about 2 months ago. As a result, the residents here have put chicken wire over the front windows here. This will prevent Molotov cocktails from coming in. Though most residents stay indoors at night, they keep up with the drug and gang activity outside by nightly phone calls to one another.
There's some drug dealing activity over at Susan's old house again. I wonder what's happening down there.
As the block captain of his neighborhood crime watch, Jim often hits the streets to see what's happening in the dark and check with neighbors.
It's just up and down. We're in a bad spell right now, but I think it's going to get better.
Over the last week, there's probably been about 3-4 choppers a day.
Meanwhile, back at the house, another neighbor, Brian, drops by. The topic of conversation is always the same.
Is it as serious as it sounds to somebody from the outside?
Absolutely. I've got to watch myself when I come in. I've got to be checking corners in front of me, behind me. I've got to be checking cars. I've got to be making sure all the time who's in my back, who's in my front. Before I make a street, I'll look up and see whether there's a group of people up there. If there are, I'll take another route. I'm locked in. I'm a prisoner in my own home.
After final phone calls and chores, the family prepares for bed. Jim begins by setting up a video camera in the front window. In case anything happens during the night, he will have video proof. But setting up the surveillance camera here is only the beginning of this family's nightly safety routine.
Good night.
While the family slept over the next 7 hours, we decided to see what was happening outside. We traveled nearly every street in Oakwood, even the notorious Brooks Avenue. But only once did we come across a group of people. All of whom scattered when they saw our camera. On a normal night, residents tell us they hear at least 8 or 9 gunshots here. But on this night, we heard nothing.
Try to get up. It was okay. It was a good evening. It was a good night. Not, it was unusual because it was no shocks or anything.
Some of the neighbors have told me, and I agree, that since this war has broken out and the police have increased their presence, it's the best we've ever had for years. People have been getting a full night's sleep for the first time in years.
In Oakwood, Dave Barker, Channel 2 Action News.
All right, a night in Oakwood. Now, did you notice? Nothing happened that night. We won an Emmy for that. Just really, really wonderful little moments. I always say to cover a really big story, think small sometimes. Find you don't have to go talk to the police chiefs and all that stuff. Just find your nice microcosmic kind of people and tell your story. All right, next I'm gonna show you a story that I'm not particularly proud of. It's a big story. It was when the Ninth Ward, that was devastated following Hurricane Katrina, reopened to the people who used to live there. Nobody lived there anymore after that. It was wiped away.
These are the last images we saw of the Ninth Ward. Underwater after a major levee break. Reflooded after Hurricane Rita swirled through. This tour will be of areas in the Ninth Ward where no cameras have been allowed until now. Right after we crossed the St. Claude Bridge, the signs of indescribable destruction rose. The homeowners were warned it was about to get worse. Much worse.
There's absolutely nothing in your home that is salvageable. I'll tell you that right now. No matter how nice the furniture you had, the big screen TV or whatever, it's all destroyed.
The farther we ventured in, the heavier hearts became.
That was houses there.
Now my job is to honestly describe things, but honestly, I can't describe this. I swear I thought I'd seen it all over the last 2 months. What we've been hearing on the bus, that's my grandmother's house, that's my house, that's the store that I've gone to for 40 years. There's my church, there's my school, and they all look like this. Take a look down the street here. I mean, the debris has been cleared so you can see down the street, but there's nothing salvageable here. Nothing. The more we saw, the less I understood that this now broken place was once the seed from which hundreds of thousands of families have tightly grown.
Everyone played together. We went to school together. Everyone watched everyone's children. It's indescribable. It like blows your mind.
There's nothing positive in there. Nothing.
Nothing positive.
In high definition, Dave Barker, VOOM, HD News, the Ninth Ward, New Orleans.
I didn't like that story. I just looked at this for the first time in a couple of years last week. Their eyes were amazing the more I think about it now. And the screaming, and that's how that piece should have started. It shouldn't have been me with all those lofty words and those long overwritten sentences I used. Now what happened was I was totally inspired with what happened there. My heart was so touched. I don't know how many tears we all had that day. I was just so inspired. I thought I'd impress everybody with my writing. What I ended up doing was just kind of diffusing that story. So kind of keep that in mind. It's really easy to overwrite something that you want written well, okay? So in other words, if I were you, just try to simplify it if you get into that. So in conclusion, remember, you don't always write with words, right? You write with natural sound, music sometimes, hopefully music generated at the scene, short declarative sentences and sound bites, all those kind of things. Graphics, all part of the writing process too. By the way, the best writers I've ever known are the best readers, all right? Read. You know what? This is really the first book after college. I really wasn't much of a reader back then. I didn't read any extra books. But then Nicaragua was kind of blowing up early in my career. Daniel Ortega, I think, was president. So I picked up this book. And Nicaragua, I'll never forget all the lessons I learned from this book. I learned that the Sandinista rebels that were raising hell at the time, blowing that country apart, were actually named after a guy named Edward Sandino, who came from San Francisco, California, down to Nicaragua, started this rebel movement that exploded back in the 80s. So really, really interesting nuggets by reading books. You want to be a good writer, be a good reader. Find some. My favorite author is Cormac McCarthy, All the Pretty Horses. And, he's written a lot of classic literature. To me, the best thing that I ever read was called The Road. He doesn't care what you think about what he wrote. He just writes what he thinks. And it's really up to you to come up with a story. And I kind of like that philosophy. But again, good writing, got to become a good storyteller, do a lot of reading, and trust me, you'll get there.